There's a particular kind of emptiness that hits you when you're sitting at a dinner table that used to feel like home and suddenly it doesn't. Not because you outgrew it, but because it never truly held space for you in the first place. My name is Claire Donovan. I'm 20. And last weekend, for the first time in 7 years, I drove back to my father's house in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, to attend my younger stepbrother's wedding. I'd heard the phrase, "You can't go home again." Never believed it until I stepped through that front door. The same worn-out beige carpet, the lingering scent of pine cleaner and vanilla candles, like walking into a memory I never asked to relive. And then there she was, Karen, my dad's second wife, sitting perched at the kitchen island, glass of rosé in hand, lips curled into that permanent smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Claire," she greeted me, not even bothering to rise. "You actually came." Was the bus ride awful? I had driven 6 hours in my own car. The house was buzzing with wedding preparations, flowers on every surface, a catering binder open on the counter, garment bags draped over chairs, and yet, I was like a ghost passing through. No one offered me a drink. No one asked how I'd been. I wasn't part of the celebration. Just a name that got added to the guest list out of obligation. Karen made the introductions to her friends with a rehearsed cheerfulness. "This is Claire, she's a mechanic," she'd say, as if that detail was still current. "Adeca de hago?" Sure. I did hands-on repair work after trade school while putting myself through night classes. But now I work for the SEC, handling internal audits on multi-million-dollar corporate mergers. Not that anyone in that house knew or cared. They never asked. Dinner that evening played out like a well-rehearsed performance, and I already knew my role. Evan's fiancée, Madison, sat beneath the chandelier like she belonged in a bridal magazine, all glowy skin and perfect posture. My father leaned toward Evan with a kind of pride I hadn't seen from him in years, asking about the acquisition Evan's company was managing. It was some enormous $900 million deal. Karen. Of course. I couldn't miss her cue. "He's running the operational integration," she said, beaming. "Can you believe it? Only 28 I can?" I said softly. No one heard. My father nodded slowly. Evan's always had a mind for business. That fire. Not everyone's made for leadership. Claire. And that's perfectly fine. Everyone has their lane. I stayed quiet. I'd memorized this script a long time ago, the way they assigned value and status like roles in a play. Evan was the rising star. I was the stagehand in the wings. And then Madison turned to me with polite curiosity. "Remind me, what is it you do again?" "Claire." Before I could answer, Karen stepped in with that familiar cheerfulness laced in condescension. "Oh. Claire works with electronics or wiring, something very hands-on. She's great with tools." "Like a field tech," someone asked. Only half listening. Karen chuckled. "Exactly. If something at the venue short-circuits tomorrow, we'll know who to call." Laughter rippled around the table. I looked at my dad. He was laughing too, swirling his wine as if none of it registered. Evan didn't even look up from his phone. But inside me, something hardened. Not shame. Not even anger. It was precision. A cold, focused clarity. Like something had finally clicked into place. They had their version of me, greasy sleeves and blue-collar edges, and it was easier to keep believing that than to adjust the narrative. I tried once to show them who I'd become. Now, I didn't need to. Soon enough, they'd see for themselves. That night, I sat alone in the guest room, a space that used to be mine but now resembled a forgotten attic. The bedspread still bore the floral print from when I was 13. Stacks of old linens lined the closet. A rowing machine, dusty and unused, stood awkwardly in the corner like a relic of someone else's failed resolution. I opened my laptop, mostly to distract myself, to reclaim some small piece of normal. Just routine until I saw the subject line, urgent new assignment. Click. I stared at the screen, my breath catching somewhere between disbelief and irony. The task to lead an in-person pre-merger audit of Norwin Systems, the very same company Evan was integrating as part of his big corporate triumph. I read the message again. Then again. There was no mistake. My name. My badge. My jurisdiction. Tomorrow morning. I was expected to walk into Norwin headquarters not as a guest or an outsider, but as the federal lead on a merger that could define or derail someone's entire career. Evans. I leaned back in the old desk chair, its hinges groaning like they remembered me. For a moment, I just sat there. Still. Not smiling. Not gloating. Just absorbing. They had no clue. They still saw me as the girl who used to come home with scraped knuckles and grease-stained sleeves. The one they pitied or dismissed. But I had spent years building a different life. Nights spent studying balance sheets. Mornings decoding financial disclosures while the world slept. A decade of silent momentum. I never asked for applause. I just wanted to be seen. But they never looked. Tomorrow, they would. And not because I needed to prove them wrong, but because I finally stopped hiding what I'd become. At 6:30 the next morning, I was up. I pressed my navy suit until every seam laid crisp, tied my hair into a clean knot, and clipped my SEC badge to the flap of my leather briefcase. The woman in the mirror didn't look like someone coming home. She looked like someone arriving on official business. The drive to Norwin Systems was muted. Gray skis hung low, and the roads were quiet, lined with trees just starting to turn. When I pulled into the visitor parking lot, I didn't step out right away. I sat there for a full minute, letting the weight of what was about to happen settle into my bones. The company's logo was etched in sleek steel across the glass front, bold, modern, intimidating. It reminded me of something from a spy thriller. I took a breath, stepped inside, and walked to the reception desk. The receptionist looked up, caught off guard by the badge. Can I help you? Yes. Claire Donovan. Securities and Exchange Commission. I'm here to meet with Evan Bradford and the finance leadership team. Pre-merger audit. Her eyes widened a fraction. Right? Of course. One moment. Please. 15 minutes later, I was being escorted through a labyrinth of glass hallways, the kind of office space designed to make people feel important. As I passed, heads turned, people whispered. I wasn't just another consultant, they knew what a federal badge meant. And then I saw him, Evan, standing outside the conference room, surrounded by men in suits who laughed a little too loudly. His face lit up at something someone said. Then he looked up and saw me. His smile vanished. Claire, he said. Voice clipped. Morning. Right on time for our 9:00. I said, calm and steady. You're the auditor, I'm leading the federal review. I said, stepping past him into the room. My heels clicked like punctuation on polished tile. The space was modern and cold. All glass and chrome. But I didn't hesitate. I took the seat at the head of the table, the one meant for the person in charge. Because that was me. The meeting started like any other pleasantries. Credentials. Nods of acknowledgement. But I didn't come to be liked. I came to do a job. I clicked open my laptop and began the presentation with a calm authority. This review is part of the SEC's standard procedure for all mergers exceeding $500 million, I said. We'll begin with Q2 discretionary expenditures. As the slides progressed, so did the tension. I requested vendor contracts, remboursement log, and expense reports. Every document told a story, and not all of them were clean. I flagged 3 entries with ambiguous payments, each signed off somewhere along the line by Evan. Not criminal, but careless, especially at this scale. When I called for a 10-minute break, the air in the room felt dense with unspoken panic. As everyone filtered out, Evan stayed behind. He shut the door and turned to me with that familiar tightness in his jaw. "Are you doing this to humiliate me?" he asked. I didn't look up from my notes. "I'm doing my job. What you feel about it isn't my responsibility. You could have given me a heads up. Let me prepare." I finally raised my eyes. Prepare for what? Evan, for someone to finally read the fine print. He shifted on his feet. I mean, this is personal. You didn't even tell me you were with the SEC. I didn't hide it. You just never asked? His mouth opened, then shut again. I could see the pieces falling into place behind his eyes, how little he'd really known about me, and how little he'd cared to find out. "Claire, I didn't mean to. You didn't have to mean it." I cut in. Quietly. "You just had to live it." His shoulders sagged. "This deal is everything for me," he muttered. "If it falls through," I stood up, closing my file. "Then I suggest you make sure your numbers add up. Because I'm not sitting in this room as your sister. Evan, I'm here as the federal officer who decides if your deal lives or dies." After the break, the room filled slowly. Karen returned first, her heels clacking sharply across the floor, face composed but eyes tight. She handed me a folder. "Here's what you asked for. Claire. Not sweetie. Not kid, though. Claire." Like I was a stranger. I took the folder without a word. The team settled in again. Their glances flicked between me and Karen, like they were waiting for sparks to fly. But I didn't come here to burn things down. I came here to illuminate. I sifted through the documents methodically. Consultant payment. Vendor duplications. A miscellaneous international services charge that traced back to an offshore account, one not disclosed in the preliminary reports. I looked up. This line item wasn't included in your original financials. Karen didn't blink. "It's within compliance. You're welcome to verify," she added. "I will," I replied, flipping to the next page. With every question I asked, the room seemed to shrink. Evan was silent now. Posture defensive. His earlier swagger had evaporated. He tried. Once. To redirect a question to the CFO, but I stopped him. "Evan, this contract was approved directly by you," I said, sliding the signed copy across the table. "Can you explain the $280? Oh, zero variance." He stared at it like he was seeing his own signature for the first time. I'd have to review the documentation. You signed it 2 weeks ago." The silence that followed was different than before. He wasn't just being exposed, he was being unmasked. That invisible crown he wore had cracked, and everyone saw it. I didn't feel smug. I felt steady, focused. I wasn't here to punish. I was here to uncover the truth. And the deeper I dug, the more their version of reality began to unravel line by line, document by document. When the session wrapped, one of the senior executives from Axient Tech approached me quietly. Her name was Shannon. She had a calm presence, precise, observant, the kind of person who noticed more than she said. "Can we talk privately?" she asked. I nodded, and we stepped into a side office, glass walls, minimalist furniture, a small carafe of water already on the table. She shut the door behind us. "I didn't know you were Evan Bradford's sister," she said carefully. "Half-sister," I corrected, then added, "and full auditor." That made her smile. "Look, I'm not trying to poke into family dynamics, but I have to say your handling of this review impressive. Direct. Fair. No theatrics. That's rare." "Thank you," I said. And I meant it. "I've worked through 3 mergers," she continued. "And most auditors I've met either try too hard to please the executives or swing the other way and come in looking to play hero. You seem uninterested in either." I nodded. "I'm just here to make sure the numbers tell the truth." "That's it?" She paused a moment, studying me like she was recalibrating what she thought she knew. "That offshore account if we move forward with this deal? What's your recommendation?" No hesitation. "Full documentation request within 5 business days. If that fails, escalate to the DOJ and freeze the merger pending investigation." She let out a slow breath. "Good. That's what I told my board I'd expect." I didn't feel triumphant. I felt grounded, respected. For once, not because of who I was related to, but because of what I did. And how I did it? As we left the room, I realized something strange. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone's shadow. I felt real. That night, back in the guest room, the illusion of control started to slip. I sat on the edge of the old twin bed, a fingers tracing the same worn floral pattern I used to lie under as a teenager. The overhead light buzzed faintly. The air smelled like forgotten boxes and closed windows. Despite everything that had happened, the power shift, the validation, I felt something else creeping in. Grief. Quiet. Uninvited. But undeniable. I hadn't thought about my mother in days. And then suddenly, she was everywhere. In the silence, in the wallpaper, in the fact that no one had said goodnight to me, just like when I was a kid. She had died years ago. But some absences refuse to shrink with time. They stretch instead. Like shadows at dusk. I pulled out my phone and scrolled, not really knowing what I was looking for until I landed on an old email I'd never deleted. From her, only 3 words. "Keep going. Claire." I read it once, then again, and again. That message had come during one of the hardest years of my life when I was juggling subway maintenance shifts, night classes, rent I could barely make, and dreams I didn't dare say out loud. And she saw all of it. Not just the exhaustion, but the effort. She was the one who first taught me how to read a balance sheet, who taped my perfect attendance certificate to the fridge like it was a Nobel, who believed in my seriousness even when the world didn't. I hadn't needed applause that day. Just proof that someone believed I was building something worthwhile. And she gave me that. I stared at the message until the words blurred. Then I whispered it aloud. "Keep going." Claire, as if she could still hear me. Maybe she could. The next morning, just after sunrise, there was a knock at the guest room door. I opened it halfway. Evan stood there, dark circles under his eyes. Shirt rumpled like he hadn't slept either. "Can we talk?" he asked. I didn't move. "We're scheduled to meet at 10:00 a.m. in the boardroom. Not as the auditor," he said quietly. "As my sister." That word didn't land the way he thought it would. Still, I stepped into the hallway not for him, But because I needed to ask this one question, face to face. Do you remember that summer Dad took you to Cape Cod and told me to stay behind to focus on my studies? He frowned. Claire. That was forever ago. Exactly. I said. And it's still the clearest way I can explain how this family works. One of us gets the spotlight, the other gets left behind. I looked down, as if the weight of my words had finally registered. I never meant to be part of that. He murmured. You didn't have to mean it. I said again. Softer this time. You just had to live it. And you did. He nodded. Jaw clenched with guilt. So what happens now? I didn't rush my answer. Now. I finished the review. If it clears, the merger goes through. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And after that, he asked, will you come back holidays? Family stuff. I let the silence stretch. We'll see, I said. Because forgiveness isn't something I offer on cue. It's not a reward for showing discomfort when the stakes get high. It's earned over time if it's earned at all. Especially from people who only started seeing me the minute I held a pen that could rewrite their story. The boardroom looked the same the next morning, polished wood table. Minimaliste decor. Coffee machine humming in the corner. But the energy that had shifted completely. People were already seated when I arrived, eyes sharper now. Attention pointed in my direction. Shannon nodded at me. Evan followed shortly after. Quieter than before. Karen came in last. Her blouse was softer today. Her tone more measured. But the steel in her eyes remained. I didn't waste time. We'll begin with final itemization, I said, clicking the projector to life. I walked through Axient Tech's revised earnings report. Clean and corrected. Then I turned to Norwin's disclosures. Still murky. Still inconsistent. Consultant payment remained problematic, I said. And the offshore account remains unverified. Karen folded her arms. Those vendors have worked with us for years. That's standard procedure. Then you'll have no issues submitting their full documentation to our team by close of business. I replied calmly. Karen hesitated, but only for a second. Then nodded. I looked to Evan. Do you have anything to add regarding the offshore transaction recorded in last year's operating budget? His face went pale. That was outside my scope. I lifted a form, holding it up between us. You signed the approval. He didn't deny it this time. I asked Karen, she said. Karen cut in sharply. Don't shift this to me. Evan, you're an executive. You own your decisions. The irony hit hard. All those years of Karen pulling strings and Evan parroting them back now, unraveling under fluorescent lights and a federal seal. I clicked to the final slide. This transaction must be flagged for compliance review. If discrepancies remain, the merger will be delayed, pending federal clearance. Silence fell like a verdict. Shannon leaned back, arms crossed, watching, not with skepticism. With respect, Karen finally broke the silence. So that's it. You just destroy everything we've built, I met her eyes. No. You did that. I just noticed. 2 weeks after I submitted my report, the Department of Justice flagged both the consultant payments and the offshore account for further review. The merger was officially frozen. There was no headline. No press conference. Corporate scandals like these rarely make front-page news. But inside Evan's world, it hit like an earthquake. He was quietly removed from the project. The promotion he'd been promised suspended. Karen's consulting agreement with Norwin reevaluated, which was corporate language for terminated. They didn't say it out loud. But the message was clear. Burn the paper trail. Cut the damage. Move on. I didn't celebrate, but I didn't feel bad either. Watching a system that once elevated them finally hold them accountable, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like correction. I flew back to D.C. A few days later, my apartment was just as I'd left it, clean, orderly, silent. I placed my keys on the counter and stood still for a long moment, letting the quiet wrap around me like something earned. A manila envelope sat in my mailbox. Inside, a formal letter from Norwin's legal team, acknowledging the audit's findings. My name was printed near the bottom in bold, credited for instrumental contribution to ensuring regulatory transparency. I held the paper in both hands. Ade hago. I couldn't get anyone in my family to read a single college paper I'd written. No. My name was attached to a billion-dollar corporate freeze, and I wasn't invisible anymore. Not to them. Not to myself. A few weeks later, I got a call. It was my father. I stared at the screen for a long time, thumb hovering over decline. But something, maybe memory, maybe curiosity, made me answer. Claire, he said, voice softer than I remembered. I heard about the audit. I didn't know you'd become someone who could do that. I didn't respond right away. Not out of anger, just clarity. I've always been this person. Dad, I said finally. You just never looked close enough. Silence. You're right, he admitted. We failed you. I failed you. I didn't argue. There was nothing to fix anymore. Only facts. Finally spoken aloud. Then he said something new. If there's ever a time you'd let me see what you do or let me be part of your life again, I'd like to try. It was the first time he'd ever asked me to lead the conversation. I told him I'd think about it, and I meant it. But the truth is, I no longer needed reconciliation to feel whole. I wasn't carrying the weight of being overlooked anymore. A few weeks after that, I had dinner with Shannon from Axient Tech. She offered me a new role. Head of Ethics and Risk Strategy. A team of my own. Full control over what I build next. I said yes. Not because I wanted power, but because I wanted to stop shrinking in order to be useful. And here's the thing, no one tells you about closure, it's not loud. It doesn't come with applause. It arrives in moments like this when you realize you don't need anyone's permission to be real. And when the apology does come, it's just the bonus. Evan emailed me later. Short and quiet. I'm sorry for the way we made you feel. You were never less. I just didn't want to admit you were more. That was the closest thing to justice I'd ever get from him. And strangely, it was enough. Sometimes, the people closest to us never really see us, not because we're invisible, but because they refuse to update the version of us they've already decided on. But you don't have to shrink yourself to fit their story. You can outgrow their expectations. Quietly. Sharply. And when the moment comes, you don't even need to shout. Just show up. Whole. Unapologetic. So let me ask you this. Have you ever been underestimated by the people who should have believed in you the most? Did you ever have to prove your worth not to the world, but to your own family? If so, share your story in the comments. I want to hear it. And if you felt something in Claire's journey, if you've ever had to earn your voice, your power, or your piece, go ahead and share, comment, and subscribe for more stories just like this. Because your silence doesn't define you. Your clarity does.